This is a region that has very low intra-African trade, only 15%. So when you compare that with Europe, 60%, Asia grows to 60%, and it gives you the huge opportunity. Because truly, business succeeds because it's lifted by trade. Trade means access to the market. Trade means access to the consumer. That's probably what it means. So Africa is 54 countries. So at the unit level, the markets are very small. But once you aggregate it under one common market, then we are talking about a huge market of 1.3 billion people, projected to hit 2.5 billion by the year 2050, IMF numbers. By that time, 1 of every 4 people on earth will be living on the African continent. 1 out of every 4 people in the world will be expected to be living in Africa. What does that mean? Africa will have consolidated the consumer market. To a business, that's all that it means. And the question is then, we can't then debate much more about the opportunity. If the business people I'm talking about are those who are entrepreneurial and take calculated risks, because business is about taking calculated risks, solving a problem to make a profit. Now, Africa has a lot of problems. So every problem in Africa is a business opportunity to either solve the problem using a product or a service. So you don't need to look hard in Africa to produce a good or a service, because Africa has a lot of challenges and has a lot of consumers of such products. And if you want to then extend further, you can also provide for aspirations of the people. And the African population is not short of aspirations. Why? Because of the pace where they are, they can see the wider world. So for that reason, they have very huge aspirations, because like any other civilization, they need. But to succeed in Africa, we need a different kind of entrepreneurs or business people. Africa requires a very strategic perspective, because you have to contextualize everything. Africa is not cut and paste. It's not picking a model, because it's very different. And I will go into the perspective. Africa, because we always say, oh, we have been made to believe risks are high, that it requires boldness, it requires courage to take bigger risks, because other markets are positioned to be of a lesser risk. So if you are going to come to the highest risk perceived marketplace, then you must be bold and courageous. Otherwise, if you are faint-hearted, you go to where it is branded to be easy to make money. You are told, they don't have infrastructure, they don't have electricity. So this is not for the heart-fainted, it's really for the bold and courageous. Africa requires very visionary business people. It's really, there are no trodden paths. We don't have global, very few, there are few African global brands. So there are no pathways that have been trodden that you can say, I'm inspired by this. You are the inspiration. If you are going to be the inspiration, you better be very visionary so that others can follow. I think Africa requires very responsible business persons because because of its nature, Africa doesn't need to follow the wrong examples. So it is not business for the sake of making money. It's responsible business to sustain, maintain the environment that we have in Africa. If you look at pollution, Africa contributes just less than 2% of the global pollution. So we need leaders who say, yeah, we will maintain Africa in that state that is not contributing to the deterioration of the global environment. So responsible leadership. The second aspect of it is host communities. They own everything, and we'll see numbers. But the quality of life has not been very high despite owning everything that one would ever wish to own. So essentially we need responsible leaders who believe in shared prosperity, who don't leave others behind, people who are purpose-driven, not a profit-hungry business. That's not what Africa requires. We are looking for businesses with a soul, with a heart. I think Africa has been extracted, exploited for many centuries. Whether you take it from slave trade, when the commodity was human beings, whether it's colonialism, that is not the kind of business. When countries were owned by individuals, remember DRC, let's not go there. It was a personal property. That's not the kind of business we need in Africa. And particularly given our long history of suffering, a business with empathy would do very well in Africa. But shared prosperity is more important because Africa has what it takes for business to succeed. So what will business give in return? And of course, we are talking about ethical businesses. It's about ethical businesses. Because we don't have very good, many examples, then the ones we develop, let them be the shining lights. Of course, Africa requires resilient businesses that are leading. Resilience is institutional. Because as we said, it's branded as a continent of challenges, but truly there are challenges. But challenges and risks are commensurate in one way, in return. They are rewarded. So essentially, we shouldn't just see one side. On one side is return, on the other side is risk. When you see risks, you should see return. And if you are compensated for return, you say, wow, Africa is a high return, is a high risk environment, but a high return environment. And of course, then truly, the environment in Africa is not really what we want to have many years to come. So we need transformation of businesses that really transform Africa. Businesses that become catalysts of change and transformation of the African continent. That is my perspective of the opportunity the African continental free trade area is offering. It's not being offered to everybody. It's somebody who meets this threshold because Africa is developing its own voice. But I think the clarity of the opportunity in Africa becomes clear when you then say Africa only contributes 2.8% of the GDP. Africa contributes only 3% of global trade. Africa passenger traffic is only 2.4. Africa global manufacturing sector only 2.8% of the global manufacturing sector, and 3% of consumption of energy. And even food supply only 8%. And that is when it goes to any business person, a great opportunity. But we are not done unless then we look at the other perspective of what Africa is. Despite these very low indicators of what Africa is, look at the other indicators. In terms of resources, Africa is home to 17% of the world population and anticipated to be 25%. How can you have two? That's 17.
is something that is not working. When you look at total global arable land, 65% of it is in Africa. Yet Africa is hungry, is characterized by famine, and what else you can say. That contradiction is what is the business opportunity. When you say the land mass, African land mass is 20, but production is 2. That is the mismatch that we all need to see, and that is what really is the opportunity. When you talk of water, 10%, when you look at natural resources, let's talk about minerals. So for an entrepreneur or business person, the factors of production, average, 40% are in Africa. Output, 2%. How do you get input, 40%, output, 2%? And that is why the business that will transform that marketplace is a market different. I think it becomes clear when you look at those two slides together. That is when it becomes apparent what the opportunity is. Africa is endowed with the factors of production, but it doesn't produce. It has 40% of all the factors of production, labor, land, minerals, but output is 2%. So what does it say? It says the missing component. What is the missing component? What is the missing component in this equation? Is entrepreneurship. So business people, you are the ones who have been missing. You are the ones who have been asleep. And that's why I defined entrepreneurs or business taking the risk to bring the factors of production together, solve a problem through a product or a service, and make a profit. That is what has been missing in Africa. The entrepreneurial skills, the entrepreneurial competence. People will tell me capital, but resources are capital in a state or in a form. You just need to transform it. So it's really, then I'm talking to the people who transform Africa. The business people, the entrepreneurs. And broadly, the movement has come. Those who know or have the facts know Eastern Central Africa is the fastest growing region. And East Africa is a representation. Okay, let me repeat again. East and Central Africa is the fastest growing region in the world. And will sustain this for maybe 2 generations. And generations, I mean, not 10 years, I mean 30 years. So 60 years. Why? Because of a couple of factors. The first one was the knowledge we gained from COVID. COVID disrupted the supply chain. Equity Group, we donated 1.4 billion shillings to buy PPEs. As a global supply chains were broken. The bitter lesson the world learned is that you can no longer rely on global supply chains. You have to have national and regional supply chains. Within 2 months, we had used the 1.4 billion to set 67 factories in Kenya. And Kenya became self-sufficient in PPEs within 3 months and became the largest exporter of PPEs in Africa. That is what opportunities to them. It's the business people who, we just ask the business people to repurpose their factories. Really what we need to do, we need to repurpose to create local and regional supply chains. So that's the biggest lesson from COVID. The second big lesson has come from the war in Europe, call it Ukraine and Russia. The world believed in one theory, which Harvard can be credited for being a proponent of economies of scale, competitive advantage. So we allowed all of us to be fed by Ukraine and Russia in grains. They went into war. country like DRC, 98% of all its wheat came from Ukraine. Kenya, 37% of all our wheat came from Ukraine. Tanzania, 65%. So what happened? The price of wheat, because it was not available, skyrocketed. The entire world went into an inflation from a supply side. Just imagine if Indonesia and Malaysia went into war. 92% of all edible oil comes from two countries. We would all be eating boiled food. So we realized never again should global food security. There are only 5 countries that feed the world. Now, 65% of all our blood is in Africa. So the only continent that can allow diversification to guarantee global food security is Africa. In 1960, when I was born, 80% of edible oils, raw material came from Nigeria and DRC. Africa can produce these commodities. Now, let's imagine about electronics. Only 5 countries in the world that supplies the entire world with electronics. And those countries are together. They are which and which? China, Taiwan, Korea, and if you add more, Japan. They within just that. If there's trouble there, electronics. They will be like what we have gone through with electronic devices, those of us who are in industry. So that concentration is all over. The world will change the model to diversify. It's better pay a higher price, but goods be available. And reduce the risk. Risk has a price. And I think the risk of diversification is, so global supply chains, concentration. We've talked about agriculture, we were taught very huge lessons. Now look at what happened. Food inflation then became economic crisis. Economic crisis has now become financial crisis. Banks had nothing to do with food. But look at America. If you look at the total assets of the 5 banks that are in trouble in America, it's more than the total assets of the 34 banks that failed in US during the global financial crisis. I'm talking to US because Harvard is here and can verify the data. Now, we are dealing with inflation. To deal with inflation, stubborn inflation will increase interest rates. But interest rates were being increased after the lowest level of interest rate for a long time. We have not had inflation exceed 2% since, as I thought, interest rates came very, very low. Americans in the room know. So government bonds, treasuries were at less than 1% return. Inflation came, interest rates increased. I think today in US, I'm talking about Fed, 5.25. What has happened? If you had a bond that had 0.5 interest rate, and interests are now 5.5, your bond is less than 5% of its value, face value. As a result, unrealized mark-to-market losses have made 722 banks in the US market to lose 75% of their entire capital. Just issue of food. The world is very interconnected. Now, this is why the business people need to help. It's about business. Africa jumps in to diversify, but not depending on the global market. First of all, depending on its own
inter-country market. Let's talk about transformed Africa. A transformed Africa is a relevant Africa to the world. And the business people can transform Africa by creating opportunities, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's food, and then we will stop losing a lot of immigrants who try to swim across the Mediterranean Sea. You see how relevant Africa can be to solving problems. Business people underestimate the solutions they hold. They're in the room, they have had. So the issue of integration, business drives on the size of the market. So integration gives us a huge market so that our businesses can grow in scale and size and expand. So integration. And we can look the raw materials, even at a crop level. You will see how much Africa has in terms of global control. I was shocked. 87% of all pyrethrum for the world come from Africa. But we don't manufacture any pesticides. Ours is to grow material, dry the pyrethrum, take it out. It is processed into a pesticide, and then we buy it at a price 1,000 times of what we spend. Our government gets tax on 1% as it exports, and then when it comes at 1,000, it taxes the consumer. Manufacturers, take our pyrethrum and process it here. Last time I was in US, I stayed in Four Seasons Hotel. In the morning I asked for breakfast, tea, and I was given a sachet of 10 grams. It's 10 grams. And I looked at my bill after. The 10 grams of tea that I got, I paid $7. It was very painful. Because I'm a small-scale tea farmer. Last year, bonus, for a kilo of tea, I was paid 42 shillings. 42 shillings is like 3 cents. So I asked myself, if I'm getting 0.3 cents of $1, and my tea I am paying $7. That's what we do. Business people are supposed to do. I produce tea, you process it, package it into 10 sachet grams, and sell for $5. The government pays tax at $5. Our government would be very rich. Me, I just need $4. Government takes tax on $4, not 0.3. That is the transformational power of business if it's given a market access. An African Continental Free Trade Area gives that access. Because we will not break this challenge using global markets. The global markets have their owners. The global brands have taken those markets. We need to develop African brands and start with our own market, grow within the African market, and when it becomes reasonable, then we can go global. And that's how it is all. Let me end by talking about natural resources, and if you can see, we are heavily and doing. Whichever mineral you talk about, I was shocked. The world will not save itself from climate change unless it is with Talks Africa. Why? Because 60% of all strategic green minerals are in Africa. Magnesium, 78%. Lithium, cobalt, those are the 3 most strategic minerals. On average, 48% of all those minerals are in Africa.
will Africa still ship them in form of oil for the world to solve its problem without solving African problem? If Africa was to manufacture the batteries, just the batteries of a car, that will lift Africa. And that contradiction of being 17% of the population, 20% of land mass, 65% of Arab blood, but output is only 2%. 2% being divided by 17% of the world population. What does it mean? If we are sharing 2% and we are 17%, it means we are 8 times poorer than the average person. Because wealth is sharing is GDP per capita. So our GDP per capita is 2 divided by 17. The rest of the world is 98 divided by 33. That's what it all means. And that is the role of the business to reverse that trend. And you have the platform, you have the enabler, and you could really be able to do. For us at Equity Bank, we will support you. We will give you whatever it takes to be able to be successful. The market is with you. 17% of the consumer is with you. But his purchasing power is low because he's unemployed. Why? Because we exported all the jobs. Because the jobs are in manufacturing. They are not in primary manufacturing. So essentially, the complex issues of Africa can be solved by 2 things. African Continental Free Trade Area Marketplace and the business people working together to solve any challenge that Africa has. Will Africa be able to reward the business community? My submission is yes. Those who know I've been the CEO of Equity for a long time, 32 years. When I joined Equity at the age of 28 and took over the leadership, it was number 66 out of 66 in the Kenyan market. Today, because of this opportunity, Equity has emerged the largest bank in East and Central Africa. What has experience? Everybody says it's a risky market, but Equity has been growing tenfold every 5 years. That is audited data. That's a marketplace for the business people. That's what it means to the business people. It's a risk that has been priced, so all that it requires is courage and boldness to take the opportunity. The African Union has signed up to the market, so we have now a larger market to allow larger businesses enable us to enjoy economies of scale. That predominantly was done through Kenya. So we said, is this only true in Kenya? So we tried it, no, let's try. The most difficult country was DRC. And those who know, 7 years ago, we said, let's establish ourselves in DRC. We bought a German bank. 5 years later, we liked what we saw. So what do? We bought the oldest bank in DRC, a Belgian bank which is 120 years old. So today I tell people, no, we are 119 years old since we started our operations in DRC. But what has shocked me, Equity's business in DRC is growing faster than it grew in Kenya. In a span of 30 years, Equity Kenya increased the wealth of shareholders 168,000%. What does it mean?
the answer is yours. Now, it took Equity Kenya 16 years to hit a high earning level of 30% return on equity, 30% growth rate, and a return on asset of 4% consistently to generate that wealth. Looks like it will take us 12 years in DRC to reach that level, but growing faster than we grew in Kenya and generating a higher return than in Kenya. That is Africa for you, for the business men and women in this room, or the business community, or the entrepreneurs. And for the academia, kindly help us to change the narrative. That's not to say there is no risk, there is risk, but the risk is priced. And because it's priced, the returns and the growth are very high. I wish I had more time to convince you. Now that is how DRC is growing. The payback period of equity investment in DRC, it's a lot of money. You're buying the oldest bank. It's less than 2 years. Why? Because we went there as institute business people, went with the technology and scaled the business. You can see how it is growing. Now look at the profit. From a profit of, I think, $5 million in 1968, the first quarter of this year, we are already at 40. Meaning, this year we are going to make $200 million profit. That is DRC, not Equity Group. Thank you very much. That's Africa for you.